Okay, so for the inverse cosine, because sine and cosine are positive and negative in different locations except for quadrant 1 where everything is positive, basically what's going to happen is in order to determine where our function will be restricted for the horizontal line test, it's going to shift. So really what's going to happen here is in order to accommodate both all the positive and negative y values, this shifts from 0 to pi. Okay, so here we are from 0 to pi. So if we restrict the domain for the cosine from 0 to pi, our function is now 1-to-1 and a function, meaning we pass both the vertical and the horizontal line test. So this is the cosine, this snapshot, restricted. Okay, just like we did with the sine. So what that means is instead of here we're going from 0 to pi for x, this becomes 0 to pi for y, and from -1 to 1, and now our x values are -1 to 1. So this is now the inverse, okay, or the arc cosine. So again, what we have to look at are the domain restrictions for the original and what happens when we have our restrictions for the inverse. So if we take a look at our original with no domain restrictions, the domain just goes from -infinity to +infinity, which is all real numbers. The problem with that is we do not pass the horizontal line test, meaning our function is not currently 1-to-1. So now what we do is we restrict the domain from 0 to pi to accommodate all y values, positive and negative, and then the range here goes from -1 to 1. This is for the original. So now when we switch the x and the y and we get the inverse, that means the range from the original becomes the domain, okay, and our restricted domain becomes the range for the inverse, okay? So for our composite functions, when we're dealing with the original on the outside, okay, we are talking about the outside, we're looking for the range right here. So we've got the cosine of the inverse, okay, which is the same thing as the cosine of the arc cosine of x would be equal to x, provided this x value falls between -1 and 1, and this is when your original is on the outside. Okay? When the inverse is on the outside, we have the inverse of the cosine of x is equal to the arc cosine, these are the same thing, I'm just rewriting it, cosine of x, provided x falls between 0 and pi. So it's important that you're looking at what functions on the outside. See the inverse, inverse. Okay? So what this means is y is equal to the inverse cosine, which is the same thing as the arc cosine of x, which means that x is equal to the cosine of y, where your x values will fall between -1 and 1, and your y values will fall between 0 and pi.